In the 1980s, investigators mapping the Green River in Washington state faced a geographic nightmare. The terrain was incredibly dense, vast, and overgrown, making the recovery of physical evidence across the sprawling landscape a nearly impossible task. As search teams combed the riverbanks, they pulled dozens of victims from the water and the surrounding woods. Meanwhile, down in the remote stretches of the Nevada desert, police made another discovery: the burned, decapitated body of a missing millionaire named Ron Rudin, stuffed inside an antique trunk. The sheer scale and visibility of these discoveries sent detectives chasing sprawling theories. Because Rudin's abandoned car was found near a topless club with known mob ties, the investigation immediately drifted toward rumors of mafia hits and underground Colombian drug cartels. The immense physical space of these crime scenes generated an overwhelming amount of noise. The wide open geography and the gruesome nature of the dumping grounds created a chaotic environment, allowing the actual killers to remain unobserved within the very communities they targeted. In Vegas, investigators sat down with Ron's widow, Margaret Rudin. When asked to recall the last time she saw her husband, she rubbed her eye to force a physical tear, claimed she was too upset to talk, and quickly hired a lawyer to halt the interviews. Up in Seattle, investigators were looking into a truck painter named Gary Ridgway. He blended perfectly into his neighborhood, maintaining a meek, mild-mannered persona that made people believe he couldn't hurt a fly. When Ridgway finally became a prime suspect, police strapped him to a polygraph to measure his heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing. He stayed perfectly calm, effectively tricking the machine and passing the test. Out in the field, nature was destroying whatever physical leads remained. Victims left in rivers surrendered their bodily evidence to the freezing currents, and bodies set on fire turned to ash, destroying the soft tissue that medical examiners normally rely on for an autopsy. Reading a suspect's body language or walking a massive outdoor crime scene has hard limits. When a suspect successfully controls the narrative in the interrogation room and the primary physical evidence is destroyed, traditional detective work reaches its functional limit. To break these cases, investigators had to stop looking at the horizon and start looking through a microscope. They needed to find the evidence left behind after the macro-level clues were wiped away. In the Rudin case, the immediate hurdle was proving the charred remains in the desert trunk actually belonged to Ron. Fire destroys soft tissue, leaving investigators with a bag of burned bone fragments and 0 standard samples for a DNA test. But human teeth are incredibly resilient. Even exceeding 1,500 degrees, the hard enamel acts as a thermal shield, protecting the DNA-rich pulp. Scientists extracted a clean profile from this surviving pulp, matching it to drops of blood on Ron's handkerchief, identity locked in. To prove the murder actually happened inside the Rudin bedroom, investigators sprayed the walls with luminol, a chemical reacting with hemoglobin. The wall lit up with an aerosol-like pattern called high-velocity blood mist. This acidic spray happens when a bullet enters a skull, and it is nearly impossible to completely scrub away. A killer can burn a body or bleach a bedroom to satisfy the naked eye, but they cannot erase the indestructible microscopic biology deeply embedded within the crime scene. Meanwhile, in the Seattle Green River case, investigators had recovered frozen bodily fluids from the victims, but back in the 1980s, technology was only capable of providing a basic blood type. That trajectory shifted in the early 2000s with the arrival of STR-PCR DNA analysis. PCR allows scientists to take a highly degraded, minute amount of DNA and copy specific regions of it millions of times. They repeat this cycle until a nearly invisible, broken sample is amplified into a fully readable genetic profile. This newly amplified profile matched Gary Ridgway, but his defense team had an immediate counter. Ridgway frequently patronized sex workers. They argued his DNA only proved he was a customer, not the murderer. To defeat that alibi, trace evidence microscopists vacuumed the victim's heavily degraded clothing. Hidden deep in the dust, they discovered tiny colored spheres of spray paint. Infrared chemical analysis identified these spheres as Imron paint. This was a highly specific industrial compound used at the exact Kenworth trucking factory where Gary Ridgway worked as a painter. Microscopic trace evidence eliminates their plausible deniability. By finding that specific factory paint on multiple victims, investigators definitively anchored Ridgway's daily physical environment to the final moments of those women's lives. In 1996, the search for evidence in the Rudin case shifted to the bottom of Lake Mead. A scuba diver discovered a heavily wrapped plastic bag containing a .22 caliber pistol equipped with a silencer. Investigators test-fired the weapon and placed the results under a comparison microscope. The coarse marks left by the silencer perfectly matched the highly damaged bullet fragments pulled from Ron Rudin's skull. Armed with undeniable physical proof, law enforcement moved in. Margaret Rudin was captured in a Boston suburb after nearly 2 years on the run. In Washington, the weight of the forensic evidence left Gary Ridgway no choice but to plead guilty to 48 murders. Killers will often try to use fire, water, and time to conceal their actions from the outside world. But as forensic science looks closer at the microscopic level, a simple reality emerges. Physical evidence is rarely erased. It just requires a different scale of technology to reveal it.